Thank you for joining us tonight. It is Thursday, October 14th, 2021, the year of our Lord. Streaming on Twitch, YouTube, and Spreaker. And man, back to the paranormal tonight for sure. Great show tonight. We have Varla Ventura will be joining us here in just a little bit. So much to talk about, but first, please go to www.beyondthestrange.com to register and get your free monthly newsletter to stay in the know for the show. And follow us on Twitter at Strange Days 2015. Also, like and follow the Beyond the Strange Facebook page and join the rest of the Beyonders on Facebook and the Beyonders Crew group. There's also an official Beyond the Strange Discord channel, the Strange chat room, where there are plenty of fringe topics to discuss with a friend during the show to get more information about a certain subject. Go to beyondthestrange.com, click on the show tab at the top of the page, and fill out the rest to get you hooked up to the Strange Chat Discord room. You can write me or Dave an email with questions, comments, guests you'd like to hear or see on future shows. Write to beyondthestrange@gmail.com, and please subscribe to the Beyond the Strange YouTube channel. Hit that like button to follow us on Twitch for live streams during the week, and remember, set your alerts to receive new notifications of videos and live streams. Upcoming guests are Father Sebastian next week, talking about the vampire culture. And without further ado, I'd like to bring in Mr. Dave Cruz, our wonderful founder of Beyond the Strange. What's happening, Dave?
Greetings, everyone. Salutations. Thank you for joining us. And we have a great show for you tonight. Tonight we do have the one and only, lovely, and very paranormal. Just paranormal. no, she's amazing. I just lost train of thought. I blame everything on COVID now. But no, we have Varla Ventura with us tonight, and we are so lucky to have her. So thank you very much, Varla, for being here tonight.
Yep.
My pleasure. Oh,
and
thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, and I do believe, Russ, you do have Varla's bio with you.
I do, yes. Let's go ahead and get that out of the way. Varla Ventura is the author of Varla Ventura's Paranormal Parlor, Ghosts, Seances, and Tales of True Hauntings, along with fairies, pukas, and changelings. A complete guide to the wild and wicked enchanted realm. Several other books on bizarre trivia and magical creatures. A lover of all things bizarre and strange, she spends her time lurking around lakes, diving for legends, and sailing the seven seas in search of an elusive story. Learn more about Varla at www.varlaventura.net and her store at varlaventura.net/store-front. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Miss Varla Ventura to Beyond the Strange. Welcome back, Varla. How have you been?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I've been actually quite well. Been doing really well, all things considered. So,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, definitely. And also, we have several people in the Twitch chat joining us already. We have Susan, Astro Lunatic. We also have Jose. Thanks for joining us, guys. So, Varla, what's new in the world of the paranormal with you?
Yeah. Well, let's see. I've been working on I'm still working on a couple of book projects that have not, actually I'm looking for a publisher for one of them. So I'm still working on some writing. I've been doing a lot of personal writing. I actually kind of delved a little bit into fiction and horror. So not a big leap for me.
Mhm.
So on that front, that's kind of what I've been up to. I actually have been doing another research project about some different haunted locations. And that's for something semi top secret, which hopefully I'll be able to announce soon. But it does involve a lot of writing and researching and basically just like talking to weird people and, you know, hanging out and going on ghost hunts and things like that. And then I've been like just adding things. You mentioned my store. So I have like a little storefront on the on my website. You can see it on the top bar there. And I've just been adding some things. I've got some really, let me just show this amazing art. Actually, I have to tell you, my mom did this art. She is an amazing artist. And so she has this whole hilarious series of witches.
Sweet.
It's probably, I don't know if it's backwards
Wow.
to the audience. It's backwards to me,
Yeah,
but I think it's right forward
That's
to the
yeah. It looks good.
but
Hmm.
yeah,
yeah,
so it's
looks
this
awesome.
whole series of cards of these witches who are being burned at the stake. And so I made this lovely little, it's a really cute little clutch. You can be smoking hot and put your stuff in there. But we made a whole series of cards, and one of them has a witch like this, and it says, well, you know, I always did want a smoking hot body. So there's a whole witch series of cards coming out, and she's actually creating a really amazing Viking series that we're collaborating on. So that's very exciting. And it's been really great to just be collaborating creatively with my
Mhm.
mom. So, and she's a wonderful artist and she draws witches so well. So there's those on there and just, yeah, so just been kind of keeping busy and, you know, shuffling my son around and things like that. So getting ready for
That's
Halloween.
awesome.
House
Yeah.
is ready to go. Basically,
Speak.
for my house
Mhm.
for Halloween, all I do is put up lights and like push everything forward. I was like, oh, that's
That's awesome.
kind of rearrange the things. Yeah.
I've had to actually turn my camera around on my porch a little bit because there's been some crackheads going up and down my road. They've been pointing at my Halloween decorations. So I'm hoping they don't steal my Halloween decorations
I know
because
you
I've
worry
got the,
about that, huh? It
yeah,
sucks.
I've got this blow mold ghost that I got like probably 20 years ago at Kmart. And I got it for $5, but I light it up every year, man. I mean, the spirit of Halloween is just great. So speaking of Halloween, so and the paranormal, it's always a big tie to the paranormal. I think, you know, it's just my favorite time of the year.
Yeah.
And
Mine too.
what got you in? What got you into the paranormal and got you started in all these uh, adventures you've been on?
Well, as I mentioned, I have a mom who draws witches, so that was definitely a little start there. But yeah, I was just one of those kids. I was always really interested in ghost stories. Like I didn't get particularly scared by ghost stories, or maybe I did and I liked being scared. So I think I really had just an interest. I was, you know, reading those big volumes of the, you know, collections of Victorian ghost stories and things like that when I was like 10, 11 years old. So I think I just sort of had this natural inclination toward, um you know, just kind of investigating that more myself, as well as having some pretty profound experiences as a child. And luckily being a person that, you know, being the child of a person who didn't make me feel like weird or strange for seeing ghosts or having, you know, bizarre things happen. So I think all of those things kind of just colored. I mean, we used to like, I still do this, but we spent time picnicking in cemeteries. Like that was a very, I was actually just talking to someone the other day that I've known for a really long time. And we were just talking about how I think I grew up in such a unique environment that I didn't understand how unique it was.
Mhm.
So I can tell you how many times I've actually set foot in a church, and mostly it was for a funeral or a service, a funeral or a wedding. And I'm not saying that to disparage church, but a lot of people I know had a more religious upbringing and came to the paranormal kind of trying to seek a path from that. And that's not my backstory at all. In fact, I don't know that much about Christianity.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a scholar of Christianity. So I think that that's sort of a unique kind of imprint in my brain. I will say I was not raised against religion. I just wasn't raised with a monotheistic religious belief in our household.
Mhm.
So, and
Yeah.
what you learn when you're like 10 and under, it really, really colors your view of the world. And so I learned about fairies, and I learned about ghosts, and I learned about lucid dreaming, and I learned about weird psychic parlor games and the Ouija board and tarot cards and astrology. And that colored my adulthood, or my upbringing.
Right.
So
Speaking of cemeteries, you mentioned picnics in the cemetery.
yeah.
I don't know about you, but I think the cemetery is the most peaceful place to be. It's just, to me, when I go to a cemetery, it's just pure rest for me. It's relaxing to me. I may sound weird saying that, but it really is. It's just calm, something calming about it. Would you agree, Varla?
Yes, that's exactly how I feel in cemeteries. Generally, I mean, I've had a couple of experiences where I've felt like, oh, I should get out of here. But by and large, just seeing a cemetery actually invokes a very calming feeling for me.
Mhm.
And I think, I absolutely feel, I tend to feel really safe in cemeteries. And I think that some of that comes from, you know, just as I said, I grew up not being afraid of them. And then when I was, a young woman in my 20s living alone in a couple different big cities, sometimes there's nowhere you can go where someone isn't looking at you or harassing you or trying to get something from you. And so, if you want to be outside, being in a cemetery is often a much safer place than being in like a park, because people just don't really, don't go to cemeteries as much. And those who do are frequently like-minded.
Mhm.
And there's a certain sort of peace there. And you can find time to just, sit and write uninterrupted without worrying about somebody, sitting on a bench and starting to talk to you. I mean, you might have a ghost sit with you and start to talk to you, but
Yeah.
so I think that I have that very same reaction. And when I see cemeteries, and I seek them out when I travel, because I think that it's, one, a really wonderful way to kind of decompress, but two, you also just learn so much in the cemeteries, and you can kind of see like, oh, who got that big monolith over there, that must have been someone important. And you can kind of just connect with the past of that place wherever you are um in a really unique way, instead of just popping open your guidebook. So, unless it's a
Yeah.
cemetery guidebook, which would be cool.
That would be
Yeah,
cool.
definitely. Yeah, definitely one of the coolest things in the cemetery is some of the headstone architecture. Some of the older cemeteries are very beautiful. Also, um, I was also looking through your some of your book bio on the book, the Paranormal Parlor. So, what? And I see something about the rise of the Ouija board.
Mm-hmm. So that
So,
book.
so.
Oh,
Mhm.
sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, how successful are you communicating with spirits with a Ouija board?
Oh, me personally, I was just gonna make a plug for the book because Dave's got a story in there.
Oh,
He shared
awesome.
a story with me. So I actually currently don't have a Ouija board. My Ouija board was damaged in a move, and I just haven't replaced one yet. And
Mhm.
I kind of go in and out of phases with it, but at the times that I have used them, I have been extremely successful communicating. In fact, there's even a story in my book about one of the first times I used one, which was with my sister. And I was like 7, 8 years old. And she was a year or so older than me. And we got one for Christmas. And we started using it pretty regularly and making contact with something. And then my mom ended up like freaking out and taking it away and thinking that I don't think she thought we were going to make contact with anything. So she kind of realized that she hadn't properly prepared us should something be coming through that wasn't actually what it said it was. And she hadn't done it, like she didn't draw a circle of protection around us or anything. We were just like, hey, let's play with the Ouija board, and two really young innocent girls. And I just remember it was really funny because I've talked with my sister about this in more recent times. And actually, when I was working on the book, I said, now this is how I remember it, but tell me if I'm remembering it completely wrong. And so it's talking about the time that we were making contact with the ghost of this little girl, and with the time when my mom took the board away. And I said, I remember looking at you and you looked scared. And so I knew that you weren't doing it, because she was my older sister. She didn't look scared very often. And she said, I know I wasn't doing it, and she did not think that I was doing it. And then the funniest part was, like, her reaction was, when it happened, I never wanted to touch that board again. And my reaction was, let's find the board. I know mom didn't throw it away. Like, I wanted to do it again. I wanted to see what would
Right.
happen. So I did.
Right.
I have used the Ouija since, and I think it's like any tool. It gets a bad rap, of
Mhm.
course, but I
Yeah.
think it's like any tool. I have thought a lot about why people get real freaked out about the Ouija board in particular, other than like The Conjuring and all the like movies and stuff. But one of the things I think about it is that it's not just like a little pendulum shaking back and forth, and it's not
Mhm.
just a knocking or some kind of EVP that you have to translate. It's right there in front of you, and it's spelling out words. And I think that's what makes it kind of freaky, because it's a very direct and very, for example, automatic writing. You're just assuming that the person who's doing the automatic writing is legit, unless it's you, right?
Yeah.
But like, you're kind of assuming that, you're kind of trusting that the psychic who's being the medium there, the medium is like portraying the message. But with the Ouija board, if you got the right people and you make the right connection, you're getting that message directly, and it's being spelled out in English right in front of you. And it's can be
Yeah.
a little bit freaky, especially when it starts going fast.
Yeah. And we did a few residential investigations, my team and I, over the summer. And we had found out in one of the places that there was some Ouija board activity, which it seemed to open a portal. Maybe, I'm not sure if it could do that or not, but we were pretty much dealing with demonic infestation. Do you think the Ouija board can be used to close a portal like that, or does it open it possibly?
I think it can be used. I don't know if it really can actually open the portal. I think what opens the portal is the intention,
Mhm.
and perhaps the irresponsibility of that intention. But I think that it's more of a message via that material. I do think it can be used to, on the opposite end of things. Yes, it can be used to, like, you know
Mhm.
communicate and close things off. But I think the most important thing with any kind of work like that, when you are making contact with the dead, is to not be flip about it. And I think
Mhm.
a lot of people are flip about it, and the Ouija board is the the tool of the flippant in many ways, right?
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
anyone can get their hands on it and do it. And it's not just about like demonic entities, but it's about a reverence and a respect for the dead and what you're asking of them. And we don't know if that's an easy task, and we don't know who's going to come through. And it's not. You're playing with something that is actually a very sacred act. And so when it's not treated in a sacred manner, um, anything can happen, really.
Can one person use a Ouija board, or do you have to have
Yeah.
multiple? I tried it when I was a kid. Like my next door neighbor had one, and we were just the Parker Brothers version, of course.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we were just playing around with, but it would only
Classic.
move when both of us touched the planchette and everything. But can one person use the Ouija board?
Yes. Yes, I've used it alone on more than one
Mhm.
occasion, and I think it can be used as a tool to communicate. I think it can be used as a tool of divination. It can be used just the way that you would use a pendulum, or you might cast the runes or read your tarot cards. It can be used as a tool. I put it in the divinatory arts, really, is what the Ouija board is to me. However, I also recognize that it's a much more tangible form of communication in the spirit world. And so, um, it can be, I really think that that's it. The fact that it's right there before you and you're not guessing so much or like trying to interpret what it is, but it's very kind of like, it's right there. But there is something that I think happens with the Ouija board, and this is not to discredit actual spirit contact, but
Mhm.
I think there is a sort of psychic kinetic energy that can happen among people that actually controls the board. So, like the fire starter thing where you can like concentrate and light things on fire. I think that that can happen with the Ouija board. And I've actually performed experiments alone trying to do that, where I have not moved the planchette, but my fingers are lightly touching it. And
Mhm.
I have asked a question and then intended the answer, and the thing will move. And I'm not talking like pushing it, but it's almost like the group energy. And I've also done that with another person, willingly knowing that that's what we were doing. It wasn't like we were going, hey, let's see what's going to happen. I would have them ask the question, and then I wouldn't say what the answer was, but I would sort of intend that answer. So I do think that that's part of what can happen when you're using those kind of tools. And so there's also like psychic human interference with some of the tools.
So, what
Yeah.
other tools do you? Oh, go ahead, Dave.
Oh no, I was. That was an interesting point that you just made, Varla. I was wondering if people actually realize that they're interfering, or is it something that they just do it unconsciously?
I think that some people do it like, yeah, like subconsciously. Like, I
Right,
do think there are
subconsciously.
people that have more kinetic energy and like that. There's a word for it that I don't actually know because I can't remember it. Can I blame
You
COVID?
can
Pandemic
Yeah.
brain.
through
But
proxy.
there is something, there is a phenomenon that involves that. And it's, again, it's not to discredit that you can make spirit contact, but I do think that and I think that that happens also at seances. I think
Mm.
that there can be people with really like intense, strong kinetic energy or whatever, and it can present as spirit, but it may not actually be spirit. Those are also often the people that can be magnets for spirit. So it's hard to separate. But I do think that there's a certain there. I don't know. I've just performed that experiment myself to see, and I mean that really is the original kind of paranormal parlor anyway,
Mm.
of like literally sitting around a table and performing sort of like psychic parlor tricks with one another. And both my grandparents were deaf,
Oh
and
wow.
my mom has told me stories about the things that they were members of the deaf community, and so they all would like they'd hang out and they'd play cards, and so there were certain couples that would come over all the time, and they would totally perform these like like with the oldest brother when he was a kid, this is in like the 1930s, late 1930s, he would they would all be sitting around the table and they would think of an object in another room, and they wouldn't say it, of course, and they would all just, they'd sign to each other and they decide they're going to think of it, and then they would call him in and all think it at the same time and see if he could go and like get it from the other room. Sometimes it worked, and sometimes it didn't, but they were performing these like psychic parlor tricks, and there was a certain kind of energy there, like a sixth sense. I mean, I always felt my grandma was psychic. She may have lost her hearing, but she gained a heightened sixth sense, and she could read your mind. She'd look right at you, know exactly what you were thinking. Even
Wow.
later in life, she had dementia, and at the very beginning stages, when she was starting to sort of see things, like things that seemed very much like ghosts in her house, she and everyone was kind of treating her as if she was going crazy. And I walked into the room and she looked dead at me and made eye contact with me and said, perfect. She had a very, very soft voice because she had lost her hearing when she was able to hear until she was about 9 or 10, and then she lost her hearing. So she was able to speak, but very softly. But she looked right at me and she said, "You think I'm crazy, but I'm not." And it was so eerie because everybody was kind of saying that. And I looked at her and I was like, I'm the only one who doesn't think you're crazy, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. And
That's cool.
we will be opening the phone lines shortly, folks. The call-in number is
I love callers. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're fine. 1-415-891-9083. Again, that's 1-415-891-9083. Would love to hear from you guys. Questions for Varla, call in. I'm sure she'd love to take them. So Varla, we've discussed the Ouija board, and what other tools do you use for paranormal?
For myself, I just I'm a little boring. I just sort of do tarot in particular for divination, and a little bit of pendulum work. I have a couple of other decks. I have this really amazing deck, and Dave, I'm not sure if I ever told you about this deck, but I have this original Thoth deck, which is the Aleister Crowley deck.
hmm
And
Oh my gosh, I love
That's
that.
cool.
deck,
Yeah.
now,
Very nice.
now let me tell you, because I've tried to work with that deck for years,
Mhm.
and I never quite could gel with it. I was always kind of like, I never understood it. I would look at it and I couldn't read it. Like sometimes you just look at something, you don't understand it. Even
Right.
though I'd read the books and do the studying, it's like I just wasn't gelling with it. And then one time, and my mom said, I have something for you. And she pulls out this little woolen bag and she hands it to me, and I instantly just feel like really good. And I sort of pull a card out. Of course, I don't remember what card it was, and it's a Thoth deck, and it's actually an original edition of this deck. And where it came from is this friend of the family who was this very eccentric man who actually was squatting a mining claim, like through the 2000s. Okay.
Mhm.
Like squatting a mining claim. And he had all of these. At one point, he had dealt in antiquities, and he had all of these things that he was also this like miner squatter guy. So he would hide his treasures everywhere. And he had taken that deck and he buried it underground for like 10 years.
Oh,
And a
geez.
couple of other things that he had, and I tried to get more of the story because he had passed away and he had left all of these things to my mom. And I said, did he bury it underground to purify it? And she said, I don't know if it was that or if it was really just that he knew it had some value and he wanted to put it with his other treasures. But nonetheless, it had been buried up in the California foothills underground for 10 years. And I guess if you ever have an object that you don't like or is weirding you out, bury it underground for 10
Mhm.
years. And then it seems like it's fine, because this deck is the clearest deck. And every time I pull it, I absolutely understand it. The readings are spot on. And I frequently will pull from that deck and two other decks, and I'll get the same cards in all of those decks. So
Wow.
so I use that. Yeah, that's kind
Very
of my
cool.
main, really into that cool deck.
So do you think by like burying a deck in the ground like that, do you think it like draws like earth energies to kind of cleanse it and everything?
That could very well be. And in that particular place, there's a lot. Okay, so the place where he lived is also the same area in California where I had my first and only UFO sighting in that same spot.
Oh
And quite
wow.
a few people have. There's a lot of really interesting energy in that. It's those like weird old mining towns that the
Mhm.
hills were blasted away, and there's a lot of gold and quartz, and so there's quartz crystal running through the ground. There's a lot of stuff like that. And
Mhm.
this man knew all the secrets. He knew all the secret caves and
Yeah.
things like that. So yeah.
Yeah. It's really interesting, that it seems like the spirit world has a tie to the UFO community also. You mentioned Aleister Crowley, which I think he's one of the most fascinating occultists of all time. It's just very fascinating. Um, one of the things that I think is fascinating about him. Have you heard of his story where he had channeled a being called Lamb?
Uh, I don't know if that's the same story of the how he wrote the book of the law. I know that he wrote the book of the law via channeling. He was in
Mhm.
like Egypt and was in a pyramid and like totally had a voice come down and he sat down, but I
Mhm.
don't actually know what that being is called off the top
Um,
of my head because I'm not a
s- yeah.
devotee.
Well, supposedly this was a being he had channeled. It was in the early 1900s. I think he was maybe in England, possibly, but supposedly this being Lamb that he channeled looked like a gray alien. So
Oh,
it makes you
okay.
wonder if
I
it's
do know. Yes, yes. I do know what you're talking about. And actually,
Mhm.
I wish I had it with me, but I'm gonna have to like the next time I talk to you guys, I'll print it and show it to you. But there's an image from a book that's written the mid 19th century, so like 1850s or so, and it's a book. It's called British Goblins, and it's by a guy who was actually a reverend and a consulate general from the
Mhm.
United States living in Wales, and he was fascinated with Welsh culture, which at that time was there was sort of a Celtic revival happening then, and so
Mhm.
that's when throughout Ireland people were gathering all of the old stories, and that was happening also in Wales. And anyway, he's got all of these. It's just the greatest book. It's very Victorian, so you kind of got to sift through the language. But there's
Right.
such a wealth of knowledge in there, and some really incredible creatures and beings. But there's a drawing in there, and they call it a puka, and it
Uh-huh.
totally looks like a gray. It's got big eyes, and it's grayish, and its head is a strange shape.
Wow.
And so one of the things that I have in the last, I'd say like the last year especially, but the last couple of years, I have been thinking about how many of these things, the missing time
Yeah.
lapse, all these
Yeah.
kinds of things, and that being connected to the same idea of like, being kidnapped and losing time in the
Mhm.
fairy kingdom. And then it's like, okay, are we just seeing the same things and calling them something else, which some people believe is what's going on, right? Like we called it a fairy back then. We called them these like giants that the Vikings battled, but it's really the same kind of creatures that are coming through, just viewed and described differently. So,
We do have a caller on the
oh,
line.
okay.
Um, Welcome to Beyond the Strange Caller, and you are live with Dave Cruz, myself, and Varla Ventura.
Yeah. Hey, Russ, it's Mike. How you doing?
Hey, Mike, what's going on, man?
Evening, Mike.
Hey, Dave. Ventura, I have a question. I made my own spirit board, and I use a pendulum. And there's certain things that happen with it that, I've talked to people who have crossed over, haven't crossed over, different beings and stuff like that. But one thing that happens with it, actually two things. One thing's happen. I can see the words that are getting ready to be spelled, and then it spells it out. And one thing I found was I can mentally interrupt what was going on by thinking that I wanted to circle or, do a cross pattern like that. And then sometimes I can use my eyes to do the same thing. I feel a pressure in my heart chakra, and when I release it, it goes back to what it was doing. The pressure goes away, I can do it. Am I just reverberating a thought out is coming back to me? Because I can visualize who I'm talking to, but at the same time, I'm seeing the words. Head.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what you just described very beautifully, Mike, is not dissimilar to what happens to me or has happened to me when using the Ouija alone or using a psychic tool like that. And I don't really know. I don't know that it means that you're projecting it. I think, it's sort of a fine line there because I know once someone said to me, I feel like when I read cards, I get all of these mental pictures and then I just say them to people. And then I wonder if I'm just making it up. And I said, that's basically you're channeling, like that's what you're doing. So I think that's probably what's going on with you, Mike. And your brain is like logically trying to make sense of it at the same time that your, that kind of spiritual connection is happening. And so that's why you're maybe one step ahead.
Okay. Something else happens. I was talking to this being I've been talking, and they give me names and whatnot. Okay. And yesterday he or she, because I could see him, he or she said goodbye. That was it. And then the pendulum just stopped moving. It was done. And I got on a little later, and I have a little saying I do, and it started, circling and swinging around, and I say, who am I talking to? And it spells out yourself.
That's interesting.
Oh, wow.
And I'm
okay,
there,
well, the spirits could be messing with you, The spirits could also be messing with you.
But I see another being on the other side, staring straight at my third eye, just staring at me. It's like, really, this is myself?
Maybe it's your future self.
Stuff, I don't know, but I have stuff going on,
man.
and they've said some stuff, and it's like, okay. Another thing for you, I had about 15 turkey vultures sitting on top of my house this morning, and I don't know if they were trying to get warm in the sun or
right.
Those are pretty big birds, aren't they, Mike?
Yeah, turkey vultures. Yeah, they eat dead flesh.
Yeah, I'd be guessing that there's something dead in your yard.
No, they were just up there. I heard the scratching on the roof because it's a metal roof and I have metal, overhangs. And I thought, good God, there must be a pack of raccoons out in the trash. So I got up and looked around, and they're just all staring at me. Then they all took off, but they seem to be trying to, like they look to roost. And then I came in later on, and I opened my front door, and this was in the morning, like 8 or 9 o'clock. I opened my front door, and all these mosquitoes flew in.
Oh,
wow.
So anyways, I'm not totally crazy about that.
So I'll just say what popped into my head when you were saying that about the turkey vultures actually sounded to me like they were like guardians. Like that's what was the thought that came to me, that they were sort of, especially if there wasn't anything dead in your yard, that they were just sort of stopping for some respite and were acting as guardians for you in some capacity. But your house sounds fun to me.
It's got things around. It gets spooky at night. It's out in the backyard, and it just gets spooky out here sometimes. Yeah, I just kind of wondered about that. But yeah, the board thing, I've been talking to Civil War, because I'm in Central Virginia, so there's Civil War everywhere. You got dead people all over the place.
Yeah.
Right.
And, so I'm out here doing stuff, but I was just kind of wondering about that, because sometimes I'm just like, am I fooling myself with this? Or, and then they'll make a prediction and it comes true.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the lament of the authentic channeler and psychic is sometimes you just don't know, right? You just think like, am I just completely making this up? And I personally don't consider myself a a medium in any regards. Like I don't actually like channel for other people or offer, mediumship advice or advice from the beyond. I mean, I seek it for myself sometimes, but I don't offer that as a, tool for others. But I think that is a big kind of question, that anyone thinks anytime they're doing any kind of spirit work. At
Right.
some point when you're on that path, you question it, just as you question if what you saw in the light of day is, what you saw last night in the light of day doesn't look quite the same. And as time passes, your logical brain starts to kick in. But it sounds to me like you're making, legitimate contact. And as long as you feel protected and you're doing it in a responsible way, I don't think you have any reason to second guess your abilities.
Yeah, I don't know. It's because this is actually, that's my social life, is that spirit board sign.
Well, you need
all
new
right.
friends, honey.
Thanks,
Thank
Mike.
you so much. Hey, bye.
Talk later. Michael
Mike
Jordan.
everyone.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks for the call, Mike. Again, the phone lines are open, 415-891-9083. We're speaking with Varla Ventura, and Varla is the author of Varla Ventura's Paranormal Parlor, Ghosts, Seances, and Tales of True Hauntings, along with Fairies, Pukas, and Changelings, a complete guide to the wild and wicked enchanted realm. Several other books on bizarre trivia and magical creatures. A lover of all things bizarre and strange, she spends her time lurking around lakes, diving for legends, and sailing the seven seas in search of an elusive story. Learn more about Varla at varlaventura.net. Varla, thank you again for joining us tonight. It's been an awesome show so far. We have maybe have a few more callers calling in. So let's talk about seances.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So I mean, we've been talking about Ouija boards, pendulums, and everything like that. What do you think the best thing in communication that you would need to do in a seance to communicate with the other side, so to speak?
The best thing that you can do is, if you've never attended a seance or conducted a seance, is to go to one with someone who is experienced and reputable to see how it's done. One of my favorite magical workers is a witch named Christian Day, and he puts on all kinds of events in Salem at Halloween, and also in New Orleans throughout the year. And he is his main practice is working with the dead, and so he knows how to conduct a ritual that where that the dead are they want to be there, they're invited in. So I think that's very important. I think it's all fun and games to have light a few candles and hang out, but I think it can be a very jarring emotional experience, actually, to have someone make contact with you in a group setting like that in particular. And it may not be jarring, you don't know who you're going to see. It may be jarring for someone else. They may see someone they are not expecting to see. So I think you also have to go into it 100% with an open mind. That's probably the biggest tool you can bring to a seance, is an open mind. Because if you go into it assuming everyone's fake and everything's fake and everybody's just out to get you or whatever, it's like, it's fine to have a healthy dose of skepticism. I think that's good and welcome and wanted. That otherwise you end up, following the Fox sisters across the United States, who are the greatest charlatans of all, all spiritualist time. But if you keep that, just to quote Mike, if you keep your third eye closed, you're not going to be able to really open yourself to that experience. And again, it's very important, I think, to have just the right setting, the right mindset, and a person who's conducting that seance would be able to sort of establish that, like any group ritual, right? Like any good ceremony, it should be treated as a ceremony with a beginning, an opening, invocation, offerings, the whole deal. So
Very true. Again, the call-in number is 415-891-9083, guys. And I think we're going to take a short break here. Is that right, Dave?
Yeah, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back here in a few minutes. We are speaking with Varla Ventura, author, investigator, and just a great gal all around. Very awesome, awesome friend, by the way. And really appreciate you being on the show tonight, Varla. So, yeah, when we come back, we'll take some more phone calls and we'll get some more stories from Varla Ventura. So sit back, relax, and we'll be right back right after this. Don't go away.
Welcome back, everybody, to Beyond the Strange. Thanks for joining us, everyone, tonight. We have Varla Ventura here. Varla Ventura is the author of Varla Ventura's Paranormal Parlor, Ghosts, Seances, and Tales of True Hauntings, along with changelings, fairies, pukas, changes of complete guide. You can find more about Varla at varlaventura.net and our new store, varlaventura.net/store-front. Once again, thank you very much for joining us this evening, Varla.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure.
And
So,
FYI,
it
the
being
lines are
the-
open. Sorry about that, Russ.
Yeah. Oh, you were good. Yeah, lines are open 415-891-9083. We'd love to hear you guys call in. Since we're in the Halloween season, I recently picked up some cards myself the other day, and it was, we're going to probably talk about this on a future episode of our other podcast, Pulp Addicts. Magic the Gathering. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's a card game that you play, and this set here has been released as a werewolf set, which is really interesting. And I've always thought the whole mythos of werewolves were kind of cool. I've always liked werewolves, vampires. What's your take on creatures of the night like that, so to speak, Varla?
Well, I find, of course, they're kind of quite different, right? So the vampire is much more kind of attractive and alluring, and has this very kind of lusty vibe, right? Where of course, who wouldn't want to be immortal? Or we'd all love to be faced with that decision. The bite on the neck, that's a very kind of sensual part of your body. So I feel like the vampire mythos is very different than the idea of a werewolf, where, especially in more modern mythology, meaning, in the last couple hundred years, we sort of feel sorry for the werewolf, right? I mean, Teen Wolf, right? It's like, oh, he didn't even want to be a werewolf. He just is. But that exists again and again in story about this sort of member of society who was cast out, and you can hear them howling at the full moon. Usually they're cast out for a very good reason, right? Like they killed someone, or they misused their power in some way. But werewolves are really interesting to me. When I was working on the book that I did, that's Banshees, Werewolves, and Vampires, the werewolf section, I went into it feeling much more skeptical about the existence of werewolves, and had a much more anthropological approach. And I came out of it with, I wouldn't say that I came out of it with concrete, airtight evidence, but I came out of it really feeling that werewolves can and do exist, and in a variety of ways. And there's actually quite a bit of literature about what it means to be a werewolf, how we interpret that idea of a werewolf. And of course, some of it you had, these reverend, well-to-do scholars who were first of all, total colonists. They could only, they were the ones who could read and write, so they were well educated, and they were traveling around to these different places, including even the Nordic countries, and they were seeing these rituals, these pagan rituals that were still taking place in these towns that the Roman Catholics were trying to convert over. And they would see people don skins and dance around fires and chase each other in the night and do these things to kind of actually create harmony with the supernatural world. And it freaked them out. And so they began to describe them in a way that they should be feared. Even though there's mythology and there's story about these being creatures to be feared and to not mess with, they really took on this kind of next level of their mythos during that time. And really during the witch trials, you of course you had especially in the original witch trials, not the Salem witch trials, but the witch trials in Europe. You had, I think we know about ergot poisoning, right? Which was like this mold that was growing on the rye, which is what everybody was making into bread. And then everybody was hallucinating and seeing things, and they were seeing people ride brooms.
Sweet.
And they were seeing everyone shapeshift, and they were seeing all of these things. Vampires, witches, and werewolves, if you were not called a witch, you were sometimes blamed, you were called a werewolf, and occasionally a vampire. And so they became persecuted in much the same way, and sort of kind of joined the ranks of that sort of mythological creature, although witches are probably the most human of any of those.
So that's where all this mythology came from, was from molded bread?
Well, I mean, it's certainly where some of the, I don't know, like, I don't do drugs, kids, but I'm telling you, I've seen some things when I've been on things that have altered my perception, for sure. So if I see words in the sky, it's entirely possible that you saw a werewolf on the edge of the meadow,
Very true.
Especially if you don't. Okay, so I'm joking, kind of, right? Because that's something you go into knowingly, right? But imagine not knowing. Imagine not knowing that you are like under the influence of something, and you just are like, you're just seeing these things, and it's not just you, it's like a mass populace. So that's just one little kind of like drop in the bucket of the bloody bucket of the witch trials, but nonetheless, it's it does tie in with werewolves.
And that's some dank bread.
Yeah, it is
some moldy bread.
Man,
moldy bread has given us so much, though, right? You've got moldy bread has given us penicillin. And moldy bread has given us the witch trials. So I don't know, it's like, which would you sacrifice the witch trials so you could have penicillin? I don't know. It's like, probably the lack of preservatives has changed our society.
Yeah.
I've
well, two of my favorite foods are bread and cheese, and they can both gain mold real easily.
True.
So,
true that.
Very, very true. Call-in number is 415-891-9083. Again, the call-in number is 1-415-891-9083. It's been fascinating talking with you this evening, Varla. It's just, like I said, I love this time of year. What do you have on the horizon for you that you can tell us about in your next mystical adventures?
Well, one thing that I'm probably going to start up, I realize it's just been years since I've done it, but I'll probably start my newsletter back up again. I used to send like sort of a regular something out, and I realized that I have, a list of just, whatever, there's like 800 people or something. It's not a huge list. But I've had a redesign of my website and kind of reconfigured things. And so, Facebook is just so annoying. And I feel like that's the main way I communicate with people directly about what's going on. And I just want to kind of interact in a different way. So that's one of the things that I'm going to be reinstating. And if you're interested in being part of the mailing list, I don't know if my current website actually has a place where you can sign up, but you can email me and I'll put you on the list, and that's varlaventura@gmail. So not super inventive there. And then, I'm actually writing some, I said it's kind of top secret, but it is actually some scripts for a podcast. So that's what I'll tell you. Cool. So that's kind of interesting, is storytelling. Just like hanging out and being super freaky all October and always.
Love it.
Awesome.
Best time of the year. How do you feel since, I already know the answer to this, but because, we've had COVID for almost 2 years now, just, putting everything into a hamper and just like locking up people and just not being able to get out and do anything. For as far as investigations go, how how has it been since then for you? Like,
Yeah, well, I haven't been able to really do very many, I used to travel quite a bit. And so a lot of that has just been completely backburnered for me, as it has been for lots of people. And so that aspect of, like, the research and investigations and things is just kind of, um, it's just a little bit backburnered. But interestingly, and I actually would ask this of both of you, I personally have had a few. So the house I live in now, in spite of the dark walls, is actually not haunted. I moved from a haunted place in San Francisco to this place, and it's not haunted. And I knew it right away it wasn't haunted. But then you're always kind of like, well, maybe.
Yeah.
um but it's not. But I have had a few experiences. One at like a Airbnb. That was like the only thing I'd been able to do. Is I went to an Airbnb up by Lake Superior,
mm,
Yeah.
way up north there, and had an experience there. And then also something's been happening. So I walk every day, and I walk through one cemetery in particular that's very close to my house. And I have had, on multiple occasions, walking through that cemetery after walking through it for a couple of years. But I'll tell you, I'd been walking through it, and I'd been like always walking through it with like my earbuds in and just like listening to something. And more recently, also because it's just kind of quieter, right? Because like COVID, well, it's gotten a little noisier these days. But I had been walking through with my headphones off because one day I was walking through and I was blasting something, and I felt something. And
mm.
I kind of like immediately stopped, and I took out my earbuds, and and then it actually has happened to me multiple times. I've walked into the cemetery, and I have had an overwhelming like sense of joy, like to the point almost where you like start to laugh, because you just feel like so much, like, I don't know, just sort of that is really, really positive energy. And then on the
Hmm.
opposite end of that same cemetery, it's a tiny little cemetery, I have had a couple times felt completely nauseous. And I've tried walking through to see if it doesn't happen every time, but it does happen in the same, approximately the same location. So I do think there's some kind of spirit making contact there. So I've been kind of like going to each, there's quite a few graves, just like go to one and just kind of see, like, is this it? So that's been really interesting, because honestly, in all the times I've spent in cemeteries, I have had next to no encounters, which sounds crazy, right? Because I would say I've spent at this point a third of my life in cemeteries.
Right.
But I've honestly like had like almost no encounters. And so this has been kind of, I guess that's my silver lining. My point is, because I haven't really traveled anywhere or been too busy going about and, doing all these other things, I've been able to just sort of like slow down. And part of that has been paying a little bit more attention when I'm walking through my local cemetery, which has been great.
I need to do that because I don't really go through cemeteries very much. I mean, if I'm visiting my dad or my grandma or a loved one or something like that, I typically just don't go through cemeteries, and not it's not because I find them creepy or anything like that. I mean, it's just where I know where people go to. That's their final destination, but physically. But yeah, I haven't really felt any presence. Now I did. I think I shared this. No, I don't know if I did share this. But I did have a interesting. I don't even know if it was a dream, if you want to call it. But one night, I felt like I was awake. I had this picture in my head that there was two elderly women that were just kicking it on my couch out in the living room, and one was in my. I have like a recliner chair. That's Dad's chair, and then we have our couches and stuff. So one of them was sitting in my chair, and then the other one was sitting next to her on the couch, and of all things, they were crocheting.
Oh.
And I remember my grandmother, one of my grandmothers, and a couple of my aunties would do that. They would at night, they would just talk at the end of the day, and they would crochet and stuff. And it was really vivid, but I wasn't out there talking to them. They were I wasn't here, but I could see them over there. And it was just bizarre. Like I had that vision for probably at least a couple minutes.
Did you recognize them?
I did. I recognized one of them as one of my grandmothers, and another one as one of my aunties.
Oh. Well, they came to visit you. Was they're probably making sure you were okay, but then they were just sitting in the other room chatting.
I think so. Yeah.
Crocheting.
Yeah.
As they would, right? If they were looking after you, they'd put you to bed, and then they'd go and sit in the other room and stay awake and chat and make sure you didn't wake up and need anything.
Yeah, I'm surprised I didn't smell coffee, because they love to drink coffee too.
Yeah.
That's
I do smell
cool.
coffee, and I do. It's interesting. I have been smelling coffee in the morning, and my windows are fairly closed in the morning, and I don't make coffee until like later on in the morning when I'm up and I'm moving around. But it's almost around the same time, and someone in the neighborhood must be having some really strong coffee or something, because I smell it. But coffee is like a big thing in our family. Everybody drank coffee. It was always a social thing.
And they would they drink it at night too? Like it wouldn't matter what
yeah.
time it was?
Oh yeah. They drank it in the morning. They drank it during the day. Drank it at night. Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah.
I guess I need to start drinking coffee, Donna. I don't drink coffee.
I can't even imagine not drinking coffee. I need coffee just to make coffee.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
right? That's how I feel too.
My big addiction lately is Diet Mountain Dew, and
there you go.
That gets me going every morning. But I need to stop that. I need to start drinking coffee. It's better for me, I think.
It's probably better for you than Diet Mountain Dew.
Yeah, because one of these days my heart's going to explode from just drinking a Diet Mountain Dew, probably. So, but
well, I actually switched to half calf. So
yeah.
Just FYI.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We're getting towards the end of the show, Varla. So why don't you tell everybody in the audience where we can find you and yours and everything?
Okay. Yep. And you can visit me on my website, which is varlaventura.net. And I just use my name on all the social media things. So I'm pretty easy to find in that way. And my email, as I mentioned, is my name at Gmail. So you can find out what I'm up to there. And I've got, tomorrow night I'll be on Hyperspace with Solaris Blue Raven.
Yeah.
And that's always like a really late night one. And it's our ritual. I think this is the 4th or 5th year in a row that I've been on her show sometime in October. We just get real witchy and talk about all kinds of witchy things. And it's fun.
What time is that?
So
that's I believe it's at 9, starts at 9 Pacific, midnight Eastern.
Okay.
Tomorrow night. And then I've got a few other shows coming up. I have to look at my calendar, but I know I'm going to be back on with Dave Scott next not next week, I think the week after. I've been doing regular segments with him. Usually it's like the last or the second to the third Thursday of every month, but this year we're changing it up because I have a friend coming to town, and it's just right before Halloween. So she's coming to town that night. And it's my friend who lives in a haunted house in Portland. So it's really exciting.
Very cool.
Although she would have been a great surprise guest on the show, right?
Yeah.
You're someone who's living it every day. Yeah. So, that's kind of what I'm up to. Just doing a few interviews and trying to get some creative projects together. But everything's just trying to be real patient with the whole process of stuff just not happening very quickly.
Sometimes it's not a bad thing, just kind of,
Exactly.
Worth waiting for.
chill and just kind of, just kind of hang out a little bit. I know it's been, the downtime for me has been very therapeutic. And,
Probably something you haven't had in years.
It took COVID for me to slow down.
Yeah.
It really did. But I would not ever want to go through this again, ever again. Hey, thanks, J. Ron, for coming in at the last minute. Appreciate you joining us, and everybody in the YouTube chat, Agsuki Love, and Mishka, and Mike Jordan. All you guys rock, as well as everybody in the Twitch chat, Jose, Susan, and just everyone that came in. JP came in at the last minute too, by the way. Thanks for joining us, JP. But yeah,
What's up, JP?
great show tonight. Thanks again, Varla, as always. And Russ, take us home.
Yeah. Beyond the Strange is owned and copyrighted by Dave Cruz. It cannot be simulcast, rebroadcasted, or copied without written consent of Beyond the Strange. Also, the views and opinions are not necessarily that of Beyond the Strange, host, guests, and affiliated networks. Listeners are encouraged to conduct research and formulate their own opinions. Executive producer and creator of Beyond the Strange is Dave Cruz. Host and producer, Russ Bailey. Co-executive producer is Deb J. Cruz. Disclaimer and voice work by Casper Parks. Visit CasperParks.com. Music is by Alan Hall and Zebrafish. Visit SoundCloud.com/Zebrafish. Beginning disclaimer by author Casper Parks. You can also visit him at CasperParks.com. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight, and we're posting on Twitter and Facebook. Be sure to tell your friends on about Beyond the Strange. And as always, stay strange.
Stay strange. Asta. Don't forget, it's Father Sebastian and the Vampire Society next week. Same time, same place. Do not miss
I'll
it.
join the chat.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Varla. Thanks, Russ. Have a good night, everybody.
Yeah.